Chapter 4. Cocktails with the Arts Department. You have to ask yourself if we consider economics and art simply because doing so works to the benefit of the rich and powerful. There is no doubt that engineers and scientists could optimize the American economy just like they optimize every other system to which they contribute. But if they did so, we'd lose all that money to be made by exploiting the inherent flaws in the art. Think about the combustion engine. It started as a clunky, noisy pollution machine in Henry Ford's barn. Now it's the purring, powerful drivetrain of the vast majority of the cars on today's roads. The only difference between those two versions of the combustion engine is fuel injectors, brilliant mechanical devices that optimize how much fuel goes into the combustion chambers. If a car's engine worked like the American economy, where bankers inject money to wealthy people and corporations that spend it randomly, no one would want to drive. Justin Wolfe. For the first time since high school, Evan felt completely geeked out. Back then, as a closeted nerd waiting in line to enter San Diego's Comic-Con and meet the heroes who wrote his favorite stories, it made slightly more sense for him to feel this way. The anticipation of not only worshiping his idols but even talking and interacting with them had sent him soaring into a euphoric brand of rush that, even as a 16-year-old kid, he assumed he would never experience again. But now, as a grown man, and one with a Ph.D. in economics no less, he picked his way through the overcrowded, decidedly spaceship-like lobby of Boston's MCCA, feeling glad, and maybe a little nervous, to learn that his 16-year-old self had been wrong. He felt as if his chest was so full of excitement that he might float to the ceiling if he didn't calm down and take a few breaths. All around him were the sights and sounds of a lavish cocktail hour, all tuxes and gowns, chairless high-top tables, and servers bearing things like pork tenderloin crostini and caviar and creme fraiche tartlets. The whole thing struck Evan as strangely formal, given the purpose of the talks to come, and the formality only added to the sense that he had to do everything he could to keep the geek in him at bay. His own little economic con. On this night, Evan would get to sit in with hundreds of other people at the convention center while some of the world's highest-level economists discussed their theories. Many of them were promoting their most recent books. Evan had devoured every last one of those books. Still, he was sure that he would learn some nuggets of truth he hadn't yet considered. After tonight, he would know more about how the global economy flowed and maybe even about what made these men tick. Among this posh gathering mingled nearly every top economic mind on the planet. So far, in the few short minutes since he entered, he had already seen 3 of his heroes from the field. It had taken plenty of willpower to stop himself from asking the last one for an autograph. The only thing that stopped him was that he was carrying nothing more than a thoroughly dog-eared copy of Justin's book, and he figured it would have been awkward to ask another man to sign something that probably rendered irrelevant nearly every economic principle he espoused. Thinking about Justin's book brought Evan back to the reality of what he was doing. He could still hardly believe he had managed to pull the honor together only 3 days before the event itself, but somehow he had managed to book Justin as the keynote speaker. If he were being honest with himself, Evan had to admit that it wasn't exactly due to his skill as a promoter. Rather, the rumor circulating on the networks and social media had to be the reason. The rumor was simple, and its source obvious. Pretty much first thing the morning after their visit to Bloomfield's lake house, the lead news item at every outlet featured the same question: was Justin Wolfe contemplating a run for president? The buzz surrounding that question was so significant that the organizers of this economic conference had practically tripped over themselves in their eagerness to accept Evan's offer. He hadn't even planned to ask for the keynote. He figured maybe Justin could lead a hastily thrown-together breakout session or something. But the organizers had extended the honor pretty much no questions asked, and that had frustrated Evan as much as it delighted him. The delight he owed to his desire to help his friend's book succeed. The frustration he owed to Amy, who he was sure had been the source of the rumor. The real shame was that Evan hated to disappoint all these great economists. Justin had no intention of announcing his candidacy. Rather, he viewed this as just another stop on the book tour. A big stop, certainly, but nothing more. Justin had spent the week following the Bloomfield meeting, digging into his private life and avoiding the cameras. Getting him on the phone had been difficult for much of the time. The few occasions he did answer Evan's call, he was clearly distracted by something or someone else in the room, and he never had much time to talk about the book or the rumor. "I'll see you in Boston, okay?" he would say. "We'll catch up then." That was fine. Evan could accept that, but he'd been in Boston for 5 full hours by now and still hadn't seen Justin in the flesh. He knew his friend was in town because earlier that afternoon at Logan, the media had been present for the arrival of the Wolf private jet. The limo had borne Justin away from the scrum of reporters before anyone could get a word in edgewise, but it apparently hadn't taken him to the hotel because no one had answered the door to the penthouse. Evan had called his old friend 6 times already, but Justin hadn't bothered answering. So now Evan weaved and geeked his way through a massive lobby packed with well-dressed economists, ranking politicians, and big businessmen and women. Along the east and west walls, cameras from every network and even dozens of networks from abroad had lined up, everyone hoping to get a shot of Justin entering the building or hobnobbing with some Nobel Prize-winning economist. But Justin was nowhere to be found. The buzz about the rumor was audible. As Evan made his way toward the far end of the lobby, nearly every group he passed was talking about Justin, speculating on whether he would announce during his speech, and laying the odds that he could compete in a crowded field of Democrats, let alone against Spade. Every snippet of conversation Evan overheard made him angrier with Amy. She hadn't asked him for permission to leak the rumor. In fact, when they'd left the Bloomfield residence, Justin had made it abundantly clear that a presidential run didn't interest him. So as he searched for Justin, he also searched for Amy. Bloomfield made a habit of attending these things, and his political strategist wouldn't stray too far. If he found her, Evan intended to give her a piece of his mind. Sure, he understood the strategy. Leak a rumor and give the reluctant candidate a sense of how the world would react to the idea of his candidacy. But it didn't make him happy to watch the strategy unfold without being consulted first. As he thought on it again, the whole thing made him so frustrated that he almost forgot about how he was standing elbow to elbow with all his heroes. Then, as his frustration peaked, a group of tuxedoed millionaires parted, and there he saw her. She stood with her back to him, her reddish hair longer and straighter than he remembered. She wore a long black gown that hugged her hips and flowed wide at her ankles. At her side, she clutched a simple leather handbag, and with her free hand she scrolled through that oversized cell phone Evan had come to know. The surprising allure of that dress made it difficult for him to ready his indignation with her. The dress lent itself well to her form, drawing the eye first to her delicate shoulders and next to her slender waist. He was focusing on the latter when suddenly she turned and caught him in the stare. He was so startled by the sudden turn that it took him a moment to realize the woman grinning slyly at him wasn't Amy at all. He couldn't hide the disappointment in his slump. The woman in the long black dress was Connie Ann Kelly, and beyond the confusion of the mistaken identity, and even beyond the rather colorful reputation she had cultivated for herself since the last time they'd had a chance to meet socially, Evan had a good reason to wish that Connie Ann Kelly was anywhere else in the world but here. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here," he almost said. Instead, he rather huffed the name Kelly. "Mr. White," she said, and even 6 years since the last time he'd heard it, he still remembered that subtle sense of sarcasm with which she'd always spoken his last name. Evan scrambled to throw on a fake smile. His heroes were all around him, after all, and suddenly he felt like every last one of them was watching him and measuring his reaction. Kelly always did have that way about her, that carefully cultivated sense of magnetism that made it feel like she had a camera on her and you at all times. "Been a while," Evan said. 6 years, she replied knowingly. Her eyes trained on his, never leaving and never seeming to blink, even as she brought her glass to her lips and took a quick sip from the cocktail straw. "Still drinking the Singapore slings?" She didn't bother replying. She merely swallowed the drink and pursed her lips, her gaze finally releasing him as her big, frustratingly pretty eyes darted as if in search. "I don't know where he is," Evan said flatly. "Well then," she said, that smoky voice as disarming as ever, "some things do change." "Oh?" She shrugged her slight shoulders. "Back when I knew you,